Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of Chronicle Cast. This is the first part of a two-part series featuring human rights activist, professor, and author Todd Culp from McHenry County College. Both of these episodes were pre-recorded on August 11th of this year at the MCC campus in Woodstock. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this special two-part episode. Hi everybody, and welcome to the second episode of Chronicle Cast. I've got an amazing guest here with me today. We're going to have an awesome conversation. Here with me is Todd Culp. He's professor of history and political science at McHenry County College. He's also a human rights activist and author of The Friends Whose Names I'll Never Know and Whiskey with Freedom Fighters, Tea with Terrorists, and The Journey Home. Thanks for being with us, Todd.
Thank you.
First, I just wanted to, have you introduce yourself and say what, sparked your desire to get involved, right, in human rights activism. I know specifically, right, you kind of have a focus on human rights activism in, Palestine, Gaza, Israel.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly pertinent to what's happening in the world right now. So I just wanted you to kind of talk about where you began your journey that led you to where you are.
It's a complicated story and it's an unusual story. Most academics that you meet have a certain kind of background. That's not my background. I was the kid in high school that when you were forced to meet with your high school guidance counselor that time of your senior year to plan your future, he looked at me and goes, you're not really college material. So there's three factories in town. You can work in one of those. You got broad shoulders, you got a strong back, you'll be fine in the factories. There were big tire factories, you're lifting tractor tires all day. And I wasn't planning on going to college. My history up until that point in time had been colorful, but not very academic. And I wasn't going to go, but when he said that, to be honest, he kind of pissed me off. And so I went, despite him. And that ended up leading me down a road that I could have never, ever foreseen. But it was more out of spite than anything. And when I finally I went to grad school twice, but the second time when I got my PhD in political science, my friends were like, you need to send him a copy of that in the mail just to say, screw you kind of thing. And I said,
Did you?
No, I said, here's the funny thing. I mean, I don't like that he said it. Don't get me wrong, it did piss me off, but he wasn't really wrong at that point in time. My academic record was not nearly as impressive as my police record, shall we say. I was a juvenile delinquent. I was not somebody that was planning on going to college. My family, for the most part, didn't go to college. I'm the last of 7 kids. I didn't really even think about it. But I ended up there, and that's part of the reason I teach here. When I got my PhD, it was shortly after 9/11, and I was writing about terrorism, so I had a lot of university offers. I chose to teach here at a community college because the only reason I'm here is because of a community college. I would have never had the grades to make it into a university. I had to kind of figure it out. I had to grow up some. And so from coming from a very rough background, the community college let me grow up a little bit, get the grades, move on, and 2 masters and a PhD later, it's a weird road, but I ended up here.
That's awesome.
Now, as far as the Middle East, that was part of the journey, I guess. I was in my first master's program, and I'd never left the country in my life. I was pretty young, never been to Canada, never been to Mexico, never been to anywhere, and suddenly I end up in the West Bank during the first Intifada. And it changed my life because you're in the middle of what was a conflict zone now is bordering on a full war zone, and you see things that you can't unsee. You have opportunities to help in ways you could have never, at least I don't think, helped back home. I got involved in conflicts where people came out the other side still breathing, and that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So there's a lot of agency. There's a lot of sense of meaning that comes from it. And still, I wasn't planning on being an academic, but you can't come away from a situation like that where you can help like that and not go back. To me, it became part of me. In my first book, I wrote some line, and it was far better written back then because I had time to think about it, but it was something about I left a part of myself back there the first time, and each time I go back, I meet it again, because there's something to that. I have a life here. I have 3 daughters. I have a wife. I have a career. It's great. I love helping students. But there's a life there, too, where you can help people in very different and somewhat profound ways.
Yeah. A lot of people, you've been part of what's been going on in Gaza for a very long time.
Yeah.
I mean, we met over a decade ago,
Yeah.
and you were already, your first book, The Friends Whose Names We'll Never Know, I believe, was already written. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people haven't had this on their radar until, October 7th, very recently. So, and there's a lot of, I guess, social media fervor and stuff surrounding it now. And, living in the United States, where we have been supporters of Israel, I mean, forever,
At least since the 60s or 70s.
Yeah. We get filtered news. What do you feel like college students maybe aren't getting or aren't hearing about the conflict, especially as it's pretty much solely focused around October 7th? And, this is something that's been going on for a very long time. And I don't think a lot of people may not realize the depth of what's happening, the history before October 7th, and why this is happening right now.
Yeah, that's a story that's far too long for this podcast, but it is a healthy thing to ask. What about October 6th?
Yeah.
What about October 5th? What about October 4th? Because we've talked about October 7th, and it was truly horrific. No questions about it. Anybody who says anything different is lying or hasn't seen the data. It was a horrible, horrible incident. Unspeakable things. That being said, it wasn't something that happened in a void or out of a context. That year alone, over 200 Palestinians had been killed by the Israeli Defense Forces. There were others killed by settlers. That number's still out there, a little bit in dispute. But we're talking over 200 people killed that year in different situations. Day in and day out life for Palestinians is pretty brutal. And we can argue whose fault is what, and that's a long and sometimes useless argument. But bottom line is, life in the West Bank versus life in Gaza versus life in Israel proper is very different if you're Palestinian. And it's different shades depending on where you live. But the bottom line is, in most cases, particularly in the West Bank, where I've done a lot of my research and my activism, you don't have basic rights. You don't have the right to vote. You don't have the right to assemble, oftentimes. I mean, most of the protests that I have been involved in ended up being broken up, hopefully with being gassed and shot with rubber bullets, sometimes much more brutally than that. But usually tear gassed and some rubber bullets are fired. That's basic right to assembly that they're denied in that particular case. The thing that we don't look at in this, and I very much encourage people, try not to take a side. Don't be pro-Palestinian, don't be pro-Israeli. Look at just the humans involved in this situation. Yeah. Some of my favorite people that I've marched in these protests with were Jewish Israelis who are violating their own law to be out there and protest. They could be arrested because they're not supposed to be in these protests. I'm not just linking arms with Palestinians. I'm linking arms with Israelis. I'm linking arms with other internationals like myself. It's a lot like the civil rights movement if you think about it. Look at King's protests. When you look at those pictures, it's not all African Americans in that picture. There's a lot of white folks in there. There was a lot of Jewish folks in there that were very involved in the civil rights movement, some of which paid with their lives for that. This is about humanity. When we say it's a pro-Palestinian protest, it's an anti-war protest is what it is. To say pro-Palestinian is like saying pro-Israeli or saying pro-U.S. Which part do you mean? Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, take your pick. So it gets a little complicated, but bottom line is, year after year that I've been going there, and I've been going there a long time at this point, the death rates in these years of the conflict are almost always fluctuating around a 9-to-1 ratio. About 9 times, sometimes 10 times, as many Palestinians die each year violently than Israelis do. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. What I'm saying is when you're dying at a high rate and you have nowhere to put that frustration in terms of a vote or a protest, some sort of legal democratic process, what you get is group of people that are desperate
Yeah.
and they don't have hope for the future. And I say, as someone who's studied terrorism his entire adult life and has been in more war zones than I can count, a hopeless person is a dangerous person.
Yeah.
It's not something you ever want. Well, we can get into stories about that, but bottom line is, it's a bad way to move forward, and things like this are going to happen when people are hopeless. It doesn't make it right. It just means it's predictable.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point, because obviously, if you look at other revolutions, like the French Revolution, for instance, one of the reasons why that became so gruesome, so bloody, is because at that point, they basically had a serfdom system. They didn't have a system where people could approach the aristocracy and do anything about the crimes that were being done against them, right? People were being hung for nothing, and when that happens, we see in history over and over again, you get this backlash that is brutal because it is desperate and it's visceral.
It's pent up.
Yeah.
I always used to tell my daughters, you see the things on movies where somebody puts a bunch of gunpowder and then their lights on fire and there's this huge explosion. I'm like, that's not how it works. You have to contain it before there's an explosion. Otherwise, you just get a lot of fire, right? But you get some PVC and you create a pipe bomb. Now you got tension there. Well, it's the same with people. If you don't drill a hole in there and allow some way for them to express themselves, for it to off-gas, it will explode. That's what voting's really about. That's what the right to assembly is really about, is avoiding that. And the French Revolution's a great example, because you could say Palestinians in the West Bank or Gaza, no right to vote for Israeli elections, the parliament, the Knesset, any of that stuff. So there's no rights. But somebody out there could say, hey, wait, there are Palestinians who live in Israel proper and they have the right to vote. And that's technically true. They do. But the way the system is designed, with their smaller numbers, it's very much like the French Revolution, because technically speaking, some elements of the French basic society could vote. But remember how there was 3 estates.
Yeah.
So you had the clergy, and you had the nobility, and then you had everybody else. Well, each one of those gets a vote. So no matter what all the people voted, 100% of the people could vote to change the king's mind on something, the nobility and the clergy would outvote them every time 2-1.
And they're bonded, they're together in purpose.
So it wasn't truly democratic. It gave the facade of democratic rights.
And the facade, people can see through that.
Yes.
And
they can feel through
They can
it.
feel it.
Even
I think
if they
even
don't
in the
have the words
United
for it.
States,
Oh, absolutely.
we're feeling that with our
Absolutely.
government. Because our government, right now, I think you feel, people here feel that. And I think we can, maybe we don't have anywhere near as, harsh as the conditions in Gaza, obviously. But I think even on some level, we can feel this is not real. This democracy is not, and I think, you hear even people here, saying, feeling those revolutionary, emotions, because we see that the, more powerful classes are always going to do whatever they can. They'll redraw lines if they have to. They'll do whatever they can to make whatever they want happen. And definitely.
That's why you've seen an uptick in violence in the United States.
Yeah, and you see violence here.
Absolutely.
Just based on our politics, which aren't even as extreme as what people are going through.
No, but people here, on both sides, feel as if they don't have a voice. Well, that's the same as the Palestinians are feeling in that particular situation. Now, it's different in terms of its extremes and all of that stuff, of course, but it's human nature.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, even if they don't have the words, they don't have to have a PhD in political science to say it, they feel it and they respond.
I think, too, when you're desperate, it's easy to be manipulated, right? And
Fear is a great motivator.
It's easier to get people to do things that they would maybe not otherwise do, that aren't within their character, and to stir up hatred. And again, we see that here on a smaller scale. We see the political class stirring up hatred between common people against each other. Yeah. And it's something I've seen. I'm a member of the Jewish community. My children, until this year, went to a Jewish school. They're in Hebrew school. My daughter just bat mitzvahed, and I'm in the community, right? Absolutely. And within the community, like you said, there's divides. There's anti-Zionist Jews, and then there's Zionist Jews. I would say the anti-Zionist Jews, we are in the minority.
But it's really strong
But why?
divides.
but why? And I think that because in my experience, all of this is trauma, right? People don't talk about the trauma, right? People are afraid. I don't think that when people I talk to, it's not this that they don't necessarily support what's happening in Gaza. They won't allow themselves to believe it's happening.
Yes.
And I think those are two different things. They're afraid because when you're raised Jewish, like from the beginning, you're told everyone wants to kill you.
Yes.
Everyone wants to kill you. If we don't have a state, if we don't hold on to this, if we don't have any kind of agency and power politically, we're going to die.
Yes.
And that trauma has allowed I'm going to say a non-religious political group, because Israel is, a lot of people don't understand,
it's not about religion.
It's not, Israel's not it's a secular state.
Absolutely.
And you can see that because if you look at religious Judaism, they're pacifists.
Yeah.
And they're constantly fighting for their children not to be involved in IDF.
Yes.
So you know that like this is not a religious movement. This is not even a cultural movement. This is a political movement of particular people,
always has been,
who want to have power and want to expand and want to do political things, just like the United States, and just like any other country.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important to state. But the people, have a lot of trauma. Like, I think that is often discounted. I see a lot on social media, a lot of people just like, there's no excuse, they, all Zionist Jews are, horrible people that need to be,
people
sometimes they're awful.
Some extreme.
Yeah,
extreme.
I have friends that are like, all Zionist Jews should their lives don't matter and stuff like that. They should be killed. Like that's, but they don't even realize, are we not manipulated by our own media?
Absolutely.
Are we not manipulated by our own propaganda in our country?
Yeah.
How many people talk about the trickle-down system? How many people talk about, actually believe, right, what our government tells us?
Yeah.
And Israel's a government. And they have a lot of trauma to work with in order to breed fear in their people, to breed hatred. And, Hamas the same way. It's easy for them to breed hatred because you're working with two groups of people that have a lot of trauma.
Victims. Two groups of victims.
And that's
that are easily manipulated.
Easy to manipulate politically. Absolutely. And I just wish we could see more dialogue about that because it's so strange, like I said, to be an anti-Zionist and in the Jewish community because on both ends, right? You get the Jewish people saying, how could you not want to support Israel? That's all we have.
You're betraying your own people.
You're betraying your own people. How would you support people that would want to kill you?
Yeah.
Right? And I said, because they don't want to kill me.
Yes.
They don't know me. Yeah. They don't want to kill me.
They've never met me.
They have an idea, right, of a Jewish person in their mind that is warped based on their experiences and their trauma. And that's being exploited, right? And it's coming from a point of anger. Right, just like you have an idea of a Palestinian in your mind, right, that is manipulated by politics and misinformation and anger. If you met someone one-on-one, if we humanized each other, it would be a very different story on all ends. But that trauma and that victimization allows powerful people to come in, right, and breed hate. And we see that right now. We see that with Democrats and Republicans. Right now, the divide getting wider and wider and wider, right? And again, more violence breaking out between the groups. And this is what happens when there is a lot of trauma and angst and stuff. And I see that. And I see anti-Semitism on a rise. And I see anti-Arab, hatred on a rise. And it's all on a rise, right? And I think it's right. I think it's another thing for college students is to I think we need to start getting out of the emotions, right? Getting out of that post on Facebook, that post on Facebook, my friends think let's look at this objectively. Let's look at every aspect of this because we need to calm down so that we can address the real problems. And obviously, Bibi and his, administration is a horrible administration.
Yeah.
Like, I think that that's objective. And I don't know very many Israelis. I don't know very many people in the Jewish community who don't agree with that.
Yeah.
People don't like him. He's
No.
not popular.
No.
I think that people, from what my experience at least, is that people are just afraid.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid that if they don't support Israel, that they're putting their lives at risk. And when the anti-Semitism is on the rise, that fuels that fear. Now people who are anti-Zionist are scared. Now they're backing off and saying, oh, maybe I should be Zionist,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then when the anti-Palestinian, sentiments rise, then the fear is going the other way. And they're like, well, now I need to be even more, now I need to just be anti-Jewish, period. All Jews, everywhere. I was told by a friend of mine that I shouldn't even wear my Star of David because that shows support for Israel. And I said, no, it doesn't.
No, it's got nothing to do
It doesn't have anything to do with it. But I'm saying this is because people, when they get emotional,
Mm-hmm.
right,
They don't
especially
think.
with limited information, like in the United States, because we don't have real, they get a clip from here and a clip from there.
Yes.
So it's very easy to feel extreme feelings one way or the other.
True.
That's what happens. Then we start being, there needs to be someone to blame. We need to target a people group.
Yeah.
When we should be looking at, in my opinion, we should be looking at governments and leadership and those sorts of issues, which,
No, I can give
needs to be
you
addressed.
clear examples that demonstrate what you're saying in real life, not just in abstract. I mean, my first book, the two books are very different. The first book is written about all these peace activist groups that are in Israel. Some of them Palestinian, some of them Israeli, some of them mixed. The second book is more about my interviews with terrorist organizations and some of the war zones. So, but the first book has some just beautiful, beautiful stories of what happens when one Israeli meets one Palestinian outside of the context of all the politics and all the crap that you were just talking about, human to human. And it's powerful, powerful stuff. One of my favorite groups over there is called the Parent Circle. And it's people who have gone through hell. I mean, to me, one of the worst possible things you can do is lose a child. It's bad enough to lose parents and family members.
Yeah.
But anybody who will tell you that when you've lost a child, there's something almost out of order with that because that's not the way it's supposed to go. We're going in one direction kind of thing.
Yeah.
These are all people whose children have been murdered by the other side. However that happened, they've been murdered by the other side. What they choose to do is instead of being enraged with the best excuse in the world to be enraged, if you think about it, they turn towards their own respective governments and they use phrases like, not in my name. You don't get to go kill more of them in my name. It's my tragedy. It's not your tragedy. It's mine.
Yeah.
And what I choose to do with it is join this organization, and this is the beautiful thing. So when let's take it, a Palestinian woman has her son killed, a group of Jewish members of the Parent Circle all come to her home, and they will spend time, sometimes up to a week, in her home, because Palestinians have traditions that are not all that different from Jewish traditions of sitting Shiva and things like that. They handle death in similar ways, just like kosher rules are similar amongst the Middle East breeds similar cultural rules.
There's a lot of genetic overlap and cultures that have been intermixed
Yeah.
because people have,
I mean, just look at
converted
kosher versus
from
halal.
Yeah,
I mean, they're very, very
people have
similar
converted
rules.
from
Yes.
religion to religion, and there's a lot of
Well,
crossover.
that part of the world just had so much going on. But anyway, my point is these 6, 7, whatever Jewish people, men and women, come to her home, pray with her, cry with her, console her, cook for her for the next couple of days as a way of trying to heal the wound. And the same thing flips. If you have a Jewish man who just had his daughter, I interviewed a guy whose daughter was blown up by a suicide bomber on her first day of school. It was one of the hardest interviews I've ever done. And all of these Palestinians show up at his home, and they sit down, and they cook with him, and they cry with him, and they pray with him, and they clean his house, and they just be with him. These folks go out on tour. They tour in the United States, and it's one Palestinian and one Israeli every time, and they tell their stories. And they tell how it could be if you remove the politicians from the situation who are spinning and using the trauma exactly the way you're talking about.
Exploiting these
But
stories.
I can give you hundreds of examples of this that are happening all the time, but we don't hear about that over here. That's why I wrote the first book. I would never plan on writing a book in my life, but I would tell these stories in class, and my students were like, people got to know about that over here. And so I started writing about it because of that. But here's a beautiful one, and it's an accident, complete accident. It was called Hello Peace. They bought a phone line that anybody could use to call from the Palestinian side to the Israeli side. The reason they did this is because an accident happened. I can't remember, I think it was an Israeli who was trying to call another Israeli. The phone lines got switched and he ended up talking to a Palestinian. Well, they start off by screaming at each other and yelling and crying and accusing each other of all sorts of things. And then about 20 minutes in, start realizing they're both dealing with trauma. They're both dealing with fear. They have a lot in common. And so they started this line, and the way it was financed is you can call the other side for free anytime you want. It's called Hello Peace. And they have some profound conversations.
That's awesome.
Combatants for peace, Palestinians who've put down the guns, Israelis, IDF members who've put down the guns, get together, one Israeli, one Palestinian, travel the country, tell their stories together. It's not impossible. We make it sound like this has been going on forever. First of all, it hasn't. Second of all, we make it sound like it's totally impossible to fix. There's a lot of people out there that have a lot of good ideas, but politics and power and money get in the way.
Yeah.
Every time.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. This is going to finish our part 1, but I'm going to have you back on for part 2 of our discussion for the next episode. And I just want to say thank you so much. And everyone, please look at his books, The Friends Whose Names I'll Never Know, and Whiskey with Freedom Fighters, Tea with Terrorists, and The Journey Home. Again, I'm Joy Gephardt, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Chronicle Cast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to support student journalism here at CLC, please look at the articles and other content on our website, chronicleclc.com. Also, follow us on Instagram at @thechronicleclc. If you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, please click the follow button and support this page. With that, stay inquisitive, stay open-minded, and I hope to see you back next time for the second part of this episode on Chronicle Cast.